Nelson is a city in the Selkirk Mountains on the west arm of Kootenay Lake in British Columbia's southern interior. Nelson is known for its heritage buildings that date back to a silver rush in 1886. Gold and silver were discovered there in 1867. The subsequent discovery of silver at Toad Mountain in 1886 led to a rapid growth of the town's population. Nelson was incorporated in 1897. Tents gave way to shake and log shacks until lumber production began in 1889.
2 railways were built passing through Nelson, making it a supply center for local miners. Nelson soon became the region's primary transportation and distribution hub. Nelson has a diverse economy. Tourism, forestry, manufacturing, and technology are its key drivers. The city also has a strong presence in education, health services, and a vibrant small business community.
Nelson is known for its storybook atmosphere, rich heritage, and arts and culture. It's a popular destination for outdoor recreation, particularly skiing and mountain biking. Nelson was named in 1888 after Hugh Nelson, who was the Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia at the time. In 2025, the estimated population of Nelson is more than 11,700.
Nelson has a temperate oceanic climate with cool winters and warm summers. In winter, average temperatures range from -5 degrees to 5 degrees Celsius, or 12 degrees to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. In summer, temperatures range from 15 to 27 degrees Celsius, or 59 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Rainfall is fairly consistent throughout the year. Snowfall is common in December and January.
The Nelson Leafs ice hockey team is a Junior B team in the Kootenay International Junior Hockey League known as the KIJHL. The Nelson Leafs home arena is in the Nelson and District Community Complex. It's a multi-purpose recreational facility. The area features an NHL-sized ice sheet and has seating capacity of 1,200.
The first airplane flight in the Kootenays occurred at Nelson on September 12, 1912. The Nelson Exhibition Committee approached an American, Walter Edwards. Arriving in Nelson, Edwards was apprehensive, realizing the city was in a narrow valley surrounded by high mountains. Starting on September 24th, he thrilled more than 5,000 spectators during 3 days of exhibition flights from the Nelson Ball Grounds.
On his first flight on September 27th, Edwards made an unscheduled landing at the CPR Flats at the west end of the city, reportedly on a wager. The site is near Nelson's eventual airport. Returning to the ball grounds for his fourth landing, his speed was too fast and he overshot his landing. He was unable to bring the aircraft to a stop before it struck a fence. Damage was minor and easily repaired before the next day's flight.
2 years later, on July 14, 1918, another aircraft arrived in Nelson. It arrived by the Canadian Pacific Railway for the Choco-Mika celebrations. Pilot Weldon B. Cook of Oakland, California, brought a Curtiss-type pusher seaplane. Like the airmen 2 years before, Cook was concerned with winds in the narrow valley. 4 days later, on the 18th, his third attempt was successful. He made a series of flights from the Nelson Rowing Club and then flew to Kelowna to perform at the Kelowna Regatta.
On September 29th, 1914, Military District Number 11 at Victoria informed the commanding officers of all military units in BC that all flying within Canada was to be drastically curtailed by the War Measures Act. At the end of the First World War, Nelson again became interested in aerial demonstration. Early in 1919, the Nelson Agriculture and Industrial Association approached the Vancouver branch of the Aerial League of Canada. A guarantee of $750 was given for the completion of an aerial display. Lieutenant George Trim left Vancouver on September 22, 1919 at 4:10 p.m. Flying a war surplus trainer Curtiss JN-4 Canuck. Trim followed the CPR Kettle Valley route to Penticton, where he spent the night.
Taking off from Penticton, Trim flew to Grand Forks, where he arrived at 11:15 a.m. He thrilled the townspeople with aerobatics before landing for fuel. After being entertained by the mayor of Grand Forks and its citizens, Trim took off at 1:45 p.m. for Nelson. He followed the railroad and landed at the CPR Flats at 2:50 p.m. Trim had airmail from the mayor of Grand Forks to the mayor of Nelson, and letters from the Grand Forks newspaper editor.
Before landing at Nelson, Trim gave an aerobatics exhibition. The headline in the September 25, 1919 issue of the Nelson Daily News advised that, quote, "Aerial stunter thrills large group." Again, the Nelson Daily News reported an aerial event on September 26th. Due to insufficient runway length, Trim's Canuck had crashed into the lake 75 feet from shore in shallow water. A broken propeller and other damage led to cancellation of further demonstrations. Trim had received only minor injuries and was able to wade ashore. The aircraft was then shipped to Vancouver by rail.
In the spring of 1927, the BC Government Forestry Branch awarded a contract to Dominion Airways of Vancouver. A seaplane would be based in Nelson to provide forestry observation and patrols throughout the Nelson Forest District. The district covered the east and west Kootenays, including the Aero, Slocan, and Kootenay lakes.
The company was given a guarantee of at least 2 flying hours daily and was free to use the aircraft for other charters when it was not needed for forestry. A new de Havilland DH-60X Moth CFAHS was purchased for the project and was shipped by rail to Nelson. Arriving on July 20th, 1927, it was assembled by Captain E.C.W. Dobbin, known as Ted, and his brother Claire. They were assisted by a group of Nelson's young men. After the aircraft was test flown on Kootenay Lake, Dobbin relocated to Lakeside Park, where he moored the aircraft.
The contract proved successful for both the Forestry Department and Dominion Airways. Dominion was again given the contract in 1928, using another de Havilland Moth. In 1929 and 30, Dobbin was again in Nelson for the forestry contract, this time working for the Aero Aircraft Corporation of Vancouver. On April 6, 1929, an RCAF Fairchild FC-2W GCYXN arrived in Nelson to complete a photographic assignment in connection with a survey of the Aero and Kootenay lakes. YXN was flown by Flight Lieutenant A.L. Morphy with an air mechanic and a photographer. YXN was based at the Dominion Air Station at Jericho Beach in Vancouver.
On July 7, 1928, Dobbin was invited to address the Nelson Board of Trade about the possibility of an airport near the city. He urged the committee to establish a landing field as soon as possible. The Board of Trade contacted J.A. Wilson, Controller of Civil Aviation in Ottawa, for help selecting a suitable site. Pending the arrival of the official, the board made rudimentary appraisal of several sites. On May 26, 1929, Major J.H. Tudhope arrived by car from Grand Forks with a civil engineer from Trail. A site was assessed and found potentially suitable, but expensive to develop. No further action was taken.
In 1931, a Nelson teenager suggested dumping garbage and rock fill along the foreshore of the CPR Flats to create a landfill for an airport. The youngster approached the mayor with the idea, but was rejected. However, this idea became the foundation for today's airport. In the spring of 1932, Claire Dobbin, Ted Dobbin's brother, landed at Nelson in a Canadian Airways Leoning amphibian, GCARS. Nelson continued to be a stopping place for seaplanes throughout the 1930s. Canadian Airways Yonkers W33, registered as CFAQW, and W34 as CFATF were frequent visitors.
In late October 1935, a scheduled flight from Billings, Montana to Spokane, Washington encountered a thunderstorm that disabled all its radio and navigational equipment. The American Northwest Airlines Lockheed 10A Electra NC 149076 carried a crew of 3 plus 4 passengers. The pilot got off course. Reading the illuminated rooftop sign Daily News at the Baker Street building, he assumed that he was over Lewiston, Idaho.
When the aircraft landed that night with its wheels up, it had only about 5 minutes of fuel left. Passengers and crew overnighted at the Hume Hotel. They were then driven to Spokane the next day. A repair crew arrived from Spokane with an air engineer from the airline's headquarters in St. Paul, Minnesota, to salvage the aircraft. After repairs, the aircraft took off from the lakeshore on a short runway. Only 25 gallons of fuel were put in the tank, enough for a flight to Trail, where a 3,000-foot runway would allow filling the tanks for the flight to Spokane.
A Grumman Goose NC 16912 arrived at Nelson in 1938. The aircraft would later be imported into Canada and pressed into RCAF service after receiving Canadian registration CFBHL. On September 16, 1938, the newly formed BC Aviation Council held its first annual general meeting at Nelson, attended by 38 delegates. Late in 1938, Mayor Norman Stubbs asked the Department of Transport in Ottawa to help Nelson solve its airport dilemma. It resulted in a newly hired Bill Irving being sent to the city. He found that the city had been creating a landfill of garbage and rock adjacent to the CPR flats, hoping to use the site for its future airport. Irving agreed that this was possible after sufficient time to allow the area to settle before final preparation began.
On July 16, 1939, the first of almost 40 Supermarine Stranraer flying boats arrived at the Jericho Beach Air Station in Vancouver. They had been flown in from Ottawa. During the next 3 years, many of these RCAF flying boats would stop at Nelson for fuel and accommodation, then continue to the west coast to serve as anti-submarine patrol aircraft. In 1942, a Canadian Pacific Airlines Norseman Mark IV arrived at Nelson. The crew of CFBDD was making a survey of the area.
From 1943 to 1945, Nelson supported the air war effort when Boeing established a manufacturing facility at the Nelson Civic Center. Here they produced sub-assemblies for consolidated Canso and Catalina aircraft being manufactured at the Boeing factory at Vancouver's Sea Island Airport. More than 100 of Nelson's men and women were employed here until the end of the war.
The BC Forest Service at Nelson had awarded a contract to Russ Baker's Central BC Airways, which based its twin-engine Cessna T-50 Crane aircraft, CFBMR, at Selmo for its forestry contract. The pilot was Jimmy Lougheed. Previously, he had been an RCAF flying instructor. Lougheed agreed to instruct at the West Kootenay Aero Club when not flying forestry officials.
Club members from Nelson continued to pressure City Council to continue the landfill project adjacent to the city. Mayor Norm Stubbs and his council were receptive. Construction was progressing. Aerial Club instructor Lougheed decided to try it out in a Tiger Moth. He managed to get the aircraft in and out of the airfield by using the landfill and a length of adjacent roadway. The Nelson members of the Aero Club continued to spend their spare time wielding picks, axe, and shovels to get the airport up and running. Through the combined efforts of the pilots and the city, it was completed to a length of 1,500 feet by August of 1951.
During the late summer of 1960, a Yonkers W-34 CF-ATF made several flights to Nelson. This aircraft was owned by Pacific Wings of Vancouver. ATF had been based in Nelson in 1933 when it was owned by Canadian Airways. ATF is the sole Yonkers W-34 in the world and is presently in Ottawa at the Canada Aviation and Space Museum.
The Nelson Pilots Association was formed in 1960 and continued the tradition of the West Kootenay Aero Club in seemingly endless task of building and improving its airport. Along with the city of Nelson, they eventually lengthened the paved runway to 3,100 feet. At the official opening in June 1972, it was dedicated as the Norman Stubbs Airport in honor of the former mayor of Nelson, who over 35 years was relentless for his efforts in its creation.
Nelson Airport, known as CZNL, is located along the coast of Kootenay Lake in a narrow mountainous valley. Its asphalt runway is 3,100 feet long and 75 feet wide. The airfield is several blocks from downtown Nelson.